and I mentioned this at our first meeting. So, being retired military, I have an inherent hearing deficit, so if I answer the wrong question, just make sure that I heard the question. We really, at Bellwether, do not prescribe to the model of we're here for 10 weeks, we give you a 3-ring binder and say goodbye. So this interim is really about an ongoing discussion with the Finance Committee. So we really welcome questions and discussion. It's we'll get very clear on what decisions that the county needs to make later on, but we really want to make sure that that we're enjoined in what we're doing. And forgive me, but you'll be a little bit involved in how to make sausage in this, if you will. Starting on page 1, I'm not going to read this to you, but I'm going to speak to it, and then you can kind of follow back as a reference as you like. So I want to reiterate that the project is a lot of phases looking at a lot of aspects of Mercer County. So we're looking at very early on, and this is true in any business, and you have to think about the capital financial aspect of the county as a business. You have to understand what your revenue sources are, and you have to have a general idea of what your expenses are. So the very first part of this was to understand where does money come from, where does money go, and those kind of fall into 2 big categories. The first one is transactional fees, and the other one are funds and levies. So the funds and levies are still being worked on. They'll be worked on for a while. We have a lot of people that are looking at your information and formulating questions for the team to come after. So there's a lot of work to do. The transactional fees we'll talk more about in here, and then I've got another part that I want to bring a case study about debt collection and a program that we're familiar with and feel strongly would be beneficial to Mercer County. So with that, understand that although the project, the little chart there kind of shows things happening 1 and 2 and 3, they're all kind of happening at the same time. And this meeting gave us an opportunity really to catch you up. Going over to page 3, we have a quick agenda, and I'm going to move at the pace that your eyes tell me. So when I see that you're kind of there, I'll keep moving. If it doesn't look like you're there, then I'll just keep reiterating. So at some point, throw something and I'll move on. First of all, I really want to acknowledge that the departments made themselves readily available to us. The elected official, including several of yourself, took the extra effort to give us the insight that we needed to frame up the project. There's a lot of nuts and bolts that go into this work that you'll see in a minute. It takes time. It took a lot of side-by-side time for our associates with your people, and we do appreciate that. We're going to talk about selected fee reviews, and there's 3 categories that really we were ready to talk about. The Recorder's Office, GIS, and the Sheriff's Department. And each of those have got nuance that I really want to spend time on as we go through. I want to introduce you to a program called the Illinois Comptroller's Local Debt Recovery Program. So let me just underline that Bellwether gains nothing on this program. We are not paid for doing the LDRP. We have no relation to them at all. But we recommend it to every client that we engage, city and county, because it is an incredibly effective debt recovery model that has 0 cost to the county or municipality. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes also. And then there's a handful of other topics that I just want to let you know that we're walking through. I want to kind of invite open discussion at the end, keeping in mind that this is an unfinished sausage, so you could ask me a lot of questions that I don't know yet, but that'll be fun too. We're looking at planning and budgeting. Now, planning and budgeting has a lot of facets to it, and you think about, well, we have a plan, we have a budget. So what we actually look at is we try to connect department execution to your plans, because that's the only way to effectively judge the quality of a plan. Is there a connection between your plan, your budget, and the execution? So when we're talking about that, that's the lens that we use to evaluate that. We're going to talk about shared service and expense management. Shared service, and a great example of this actually lives in an example in the health department. As we were talking there, there's a young lady there who seems to be very, very good at grant writing. And then other departments that we talked to that said, gee, I wish I had somebody who was really very, very good at grant writing. But it's a matter of marrying the two up and making sure that there's some cost sharing between the two. So that's the definition of shared service. Expense management really is, it's time to take a deep breath about expense management, because the first thing we need to do is to define what are the activities in the county that make it effective. And then we'll follow up with the questions about what do we do to make it efficient. It's easy to make a county cost zero. You just don't do anything. And that's not going to be an effective way to do this. So our early activities are, how do we define effective Mercer County, and then how will we define an efficient? And then the last one, and this gets to the early comparative data. So we're comparing you to a lot of other counties. And right off the bat, your healthcare cost on comparable counties is 200 or nearly 300% more. So we're really trying to uncover that rock to find out. Now we have to drill down. I don't want you to get overly excited about this, because we need to do comp comparison, to benefit comparison, to post-retirement comparison. It's a total picture. But this is how it works. We find something and we drill down into it. So that's really the goal for these next few minutes, and I'll take you to the next page. Because I want to talk about why fees make sense for counties. And I have been in a lot of counties talking about fees, and the best discussion comes to mind with a gentleman in Champaign County who felt strongly that the fees were influencing the cost of his pizza. And we spent a long time talking about the relationship of those two. So we can have whatever conversation you need to talk about fees. I have a listed number of reasons why fees make sense. So first of all, if you look at the bullets there, that generally aligning fees properly to service has one major function. And that's to make sure that the rest of the property tax payers are not subsidizing a transaction that has a very focused benefit. Now, whether that focused benefit is somebody who's getting a shot, or whether that focused benefit is somebody who's being bailed out of jail, it's a very focused benefit, and shouldn't be, unless the strategy is described that way, to say, I'm not going to subsidize through the rest of my budget. Now, the reason I put that caveat in there is because the board can say, in the example of an immunization, because immunizations is part of public health value, I am going to subsidize that. And I'm going to subsidize that at X%, which gives that department an idea of where they have to set that fees in. So the second part is really about the variability of things that drive expense. So, and I know that you're living this inside of your budget documents, that things rise and fall. So a new technology need in a department causes a spike in your budget that you suddenly have to overcome. Or some variable outside the world changes and it impacts your general fund. Fees are designed to be changed at that interim. So when a new recording system is required for the recorder or inside the sheriff's department, rather than being a ball that the general fund has to swallow, it's something that they anticipate, and the recorders and the clerk's automation fund accrues a value and is able to pay for that. That kind of smooths out the general fund to a manageable level rather than a crisis mode from one to the next. And with that point, I really blended into the next bullet. The fourth one, so investments in technology and staffing costs have a direct alignment to specific departments. Now, I read that for a reason. Accountability. Now, people will come in and say, if I had this technology, I would be 30% more efficient, or at least the vendor's going to tell you that. If I had this gizmo, this would be cheaper, this would be better. By tying all of those factors together, and in our world we call it the value of one transaction, value of one. So I know exactly what it costs to do a recorded document. And if the automation changes and I'm supposed to save in labor, I can connect the two of them very easily. And I can hold people accountable for that's something that really is hard to do at the general fund filter down budget process. The last part is really about trying to make transactional behaviors become self-funding. So as much as possible, the people who come in, and the recorder's office is a great example, the clerk's office is a great example, environmental health that we'll talk about on another day is a great example of the cost of providing those services should cover the cost, or the fee for those services should cover those costs, because they're very finite. Those are all the reasons why fees make good sense. Now, the last step, and this is not something that you want to knee-jerk on, but the last step is you can ultimately address your general fund levy as your transactional work becomes more self-sufficient. So right now, your levy is subsidizing a lot of behaviors. As those transactions become more self-cost, you can make an adjustment. Now, we want to do that with a tempered pace, because there are other considerations about the general fund. So when we talk about numbers here, I would not encourage you to immediately make a change to the. We're going to talk in some detail about the recorders, GIS, and department, and we'll kind of flip over to page 5 if you allow me to get a quick drink here. Too fast for anybody?
No, your pace is
I
good.
have a tendency to do this a lot, so I want to make sure that I'm thorough. But
I think your pace is good right now.
okay, great. So starting with page 5 is kind of this is we call it the golly page, right? So you get the reference that says that you can make the change, and then we get down to the table and golly. This is a conservative estimate on these 3 departments of new revenue, if you will, new transactional fee revenue, if the board enacted the changes that meet the expense. So you've got $121,871 of potential new money out there. And as we go through the departments, you'll see that it's tempered a little bit with a conservative view so that you can actually plan for it a bit. In the last paragraph, I want to point this out because there's not many times we get to toot our horn. That number in the first 3 weeks represents over 340% ROI on our fee. So we try to make ourselves self-funding also. Looking at page 6 and 7, and actually I'm going to tell you that 6 and 7 are here because the statutes say that the public has the right to request documents about fee reviews. So 6 and 7 describe how to make sausage. It says that we followed the statutes. It says how the steps that we went through on fee reviews. It says that we followed the federal guidelines. Other than that, it doesn't say much more. So let me bring you to one of the first points. This is on page 8. We'll talk about the recorders. So first of all, inside of the clerk recorder's office lives an elected official who is a jack of all trades and serves so many different roles in this county that we had to go through her department and figure out which parts of it fell into which bucket. The activities related to election, no fee can be assigned to that. That's a cost of general government. It's a set-aside. There are times that she spends doing payroll, or her staff spends doing payroll. We mapped that out, and it actually ends up being an allocation of $194 per employee per year. Now that's important because that becomes an allocation from other funds back into the general fund. So you're doing centralized payroll. Other people are going to pay for that shared service. So you're already kind of bumping into, yes, sir?
So you're saying that each of the employees in the county clerk's office is doing $194,000, no, this is $194 worth of work on payroll?
No, I'm saying that by the time that office does payroll and benefits all year long, the cost of that divided into the number of involved employees is $194.
Okay.
Now, you actually do not have a lot of centralized services like that. So as you move forward and as you begin to centralize some of your administration, those kinds of allocations will become more and more transparent. You'll have centralized contract negotiations, a lot of things that this shared service is doing, so you can kind of expect that distribution, that shared allocation will change over a period of time. Okay, so the next one down, and this is a little inside baseball, and we've talked to Phyllis, and she'll meet with the state's attorney. There's a lot of confusion across the state about a particular fee that the recorder collects, whether a dollar goes into one pocket or it goes into another pocket. Our attorneys read it one way. This document follows that, and we're just saying your state's attorney should work with the recorder to make sure that you're in agreement with it. Other than that, it's a pretty boring statute that said collect the dollar here instead of collecting it here. That's it. We put GIS with the recorder because it is collected as a vehicle on recorded documents. So the GIS fee is collected on each land record. We priced out the cost of GIS, and there's a slight increase. But some of the things that when Nat met with Mary, there was a lot of discussion about the underutilization of the GIS information. So you think about economic development, and we elaborated in this more here, and we're going to talk about it again later in meetings. GIS is a method for economic development to view you online. So when I look at, I want a place to put a business, before I ever call you, I go online and I look at your GIS information, and the layered information of tax and parcel and payment and all of the information that's in there allows them to shop before they contact. Yes, sir?
Now, acronym GIS, are you referring to Graphic Information System?
Geographic Information System. Yes, sir. I apologize.
Okay.
So the current plan is kind of the minimalist approach. Right now, you're at $19. There's another dollar that goes to the recorder in the general fund, making it a $20 fee. We're recommending a $4 increase to match the current expense. But I'm stalling here because I want you to think about it in the long run also, that when housing developers look at an area, when new business site selection, we can tell you from experience that franchise growth, like McDonald's and Casey's and all of those kinds of stores and businesses, they choose their location using GIS before they ever contact anybody in the county. So this is a marketing part, and a lot of departments can make use of the information. So looking at page 9, and I'll speak to this fairly quickly. The bar chart on the top will give you all the information that you need. So you didn't previously have a dock storage fee. That's allowed by statute for Phyllis to collect a $3 fee with each recorded document. She retains that and then uses that to pay for preservation and electronic storage of her records, which is a charge of her office. Now the idea here is that rather than this being a request to the general fund next year for another $50,000 to rebind books, which is a business I should get into because they charge incredible amounts of money to rebind books. But instead of that being a monster that the general fund has to spend, she can accrue over a period of time, and this is a phrase you're going to